वैष्णवा रूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय वंचाकल्पतरुभ्यस्य कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। सर्वशास्त्रादि पीयूष सर्ववैदिक सत्फल सर्व सिद्धांत रत्नाद्य सर्वैलौकिक दृक्पद सर्वभागवत प्राण श्रीमद्भागवतो प्रभु कलिद्वंतोतिदादित्य श्री कृष्ण परिवर्तिता परमानंद पाठाय प्रेम वर्ष अक्षराय ते सर्वदा सर्वसेवाय श्री कृष्णाय नमोस्तुते। मदेक बंधु मत संगीन मद गुरु मन महाधन मन निस्तारक मन भाग्य मन आनंद नमोस्तुते। असाधु साधुता दाइन अति नीचोत ताकर हा नामुंचा कदातिन मां प्रेम हृत कंथयो स्फुरा। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायण नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। Hare Krishna. So today is actually the disappearance day of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So we'll start off by offering prayers to him. नमा ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती इति नामिने श्रीवार्षभानवी देवी दयिताय कृपाधे कृष्ण संबंध विज्ञान दायिने प्रभवे नमः। माधुर्योज्वल प्रेमाद्य श्री रूपानुगा भक्तिदा श्री गौर करुणा शक्ति विग्रहाय नमोस्तुते। नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्रीमूर्ते दीनतारिणे रूपनुग विरुद्धाप सिद्धांत द्वंत हारिणे शीला भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर प्रभुपाद की जय। हरे कृष्ण। Okay. So let's get started. So we are continuing chapter 15. Anyone had any realizations you'd like to share with the section that we read in chapter 15? Or also, I'm interested to know if anyone did the homework that I put on the group. And if you would like to share any realizations with the homework. Not the regular weekly homework, but the homework about where we actually say, like how Arjun, he was meditating on Lord Shri Krishna and saying, like, only by his mercy. And he actually was meditating on the most crucial or the most major important events of his life. And it's a very wonderful meditation like that. Anyway, it was very nice for me to go through it. But if anyone would like to share any realizations also with respect to that, right? So either what we have covered or something about the homework that we discussed. So let's quickly go through and then we'll continue our chapter. Who would like to start?
While thinking about Arjuna and how he was grateful for all the activities that, all the incidents that happened with the Lord and how Lord protected him. I think I was meditating that without Srila Prabhupada, we won't be here. So how grateful we should be to Srila Prabhupada to give us this movement, activities, Hare Krishna mantra, devotees, deities. So it's innumerable. Very similar. So we can have like more than 15 plus verses glorifying Prabhupada in each aspect.
Yes. Thank you, bro. Very nice meditation. Only by the mercy of Krishna we receive the special gift of some or other the good fortune of coming in contact with Srila Prabhupada. And then because of Srila Prabhupada, you have everything. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, anyone next?
Hi, Prabhu. Of Lord Krishna, I could not get good marks in my entrance examination, could not go to Bangalore. Otherwise, I would have become a Ritik. So,
Okay, thank you, Madhuri. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, sir.
This one miracle that I owe everything to Krishna is me coming to North Carolina and moving. I was really praying that we were putting our feet in two different boats and two different spiritual paths. And I was praying Krishna very hard that if in this way we cannot continue, do something. And then he pulled us out with the roots and put us in North Carolina so we can completely 100% dedicate to Krishna and ISKCON and progress a little bit. So I completely owe that to Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I think only by Krishna's mercy I met you, Prabhuji. My whole journey started. I still remember what you said on the day of Gita Jayanti when I came to you for Bhagavad Gita classes. Yes, Mataji, it will be done in 3 months. That's it. Once you start, the Bhagavad Gita classes will be done both for children and adults in 3 months. I thought it will be done in 3 months. One sweet thing I never forget, Prabhuji. Because of you, I'm in ISKCON, I got initiated. So many things happened in my life. My real journey started, let me put it that way. My real spiritual journey started. I'm deeply indebted to you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your kind words. It's a tiny instrument of the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and our Guru Jans. Hare Krishna. Okay, anyone else? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we only by Krishna's mercy, we were able to get into ISKCON, and with the philosophy, there were so many other philosophies we were going through, but this was by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. It was simple and clear, and what to do, and these instructions were made our life also very streamlined and focus on what really is needed. Thank you so much, Srila Prabhupada, and because of Krishna's mercy, we got Srila Prabhupada.
Wonderful. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Thank you to you, Prabhuji Mataji. Because of you, we are able to learn. So we are so thankful to you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so should we go ahead? Okay.
It was a really nice meditation to think only by Krishna's mercy. And it's almost like I feel like everything in life is like just, every aspect is just because of Krishna's mercy. And I was thinking, because of Prabhupada and Krishna's mercy, I got a chance to, from childhood, to know about Krishna. So I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity. And every aspect of life, I just feel like it's all Krishna's mercy. The good and bad, it's all just an opportunity to move forward, in Krishna's service.
Yeah, when you start, that was my realization. I was thinking, I should point out some specific, because Arjun is particularly mentioning specific incidents in his life and saying only by the mercy of Krishna, and then with so many things we read, right? So I was thinking, okay, what can I think of specific? Then my mind went more towards well, everything in my life is actually Krishna's mercy. What is outside of Krishna's mercy, right? But then, I try to narrow down, because when you think of more specific, then you can actually see how Krishna's hand in a particular incident, right? And particularly when you see things which were actually difficult, difficult situations in your life, And there you see, like, at least my realization was, you can actually see Krishna's hand more subtly acting, in that situation, or way you were thinking, or way things manifested. And you can see, oh, it was actually Krishna who directed me to make this decision or do this. And then this is how, I could overcome the difficulty. So this is a very nice meditation. So if anyone you have not done it, you can actually go back, spend more time, think about it. It's very powerful way of connecting to Krishna. Okay, so let's continue. Text number 28, right? And then we'll finish this chapter, and let's see how much time I want to go to chapter 16 also today. Right? So we are reading the section where Arjun, so quickly. So Arjun actually, he was remembering all these different instances in life and saying all that is only because of the mercy of Krishna. And then he actually said, but now since Krishna has left, everything has become void. And all my power, which used to astonish even the demigods, that power has also gone away, right? And then because I have, without power, I have been defeated by those infidel cowherd men, right? And have been unable to protect the queens of Krishna, right? And then we discussed that, that's actually all Krishna's pastime. It's all based on the desires of the queens, that they actually wanted to associate with the form of Krishna in Vrindavan, or associate with the form that the gopis were actually associating with, and that was the pastime. And then Krishna, and then after that, then Arjun actually remembers. He is actually remembering those instructions of Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, basically the Bhagavad Gita. And then he actually says, just by remembering those instructions, right, all that is material contamination in my heart is actually washed away, right? So this point we discussed, that what is that material contamination? How can Arjun, an eternal associate of the Lord, have any kind of material contamination? So we discuss of text 30, but from 28 the section goes. So quickly, I'll just 28, 29, 30, I'll just do a quick overview. So in 28, Arjun is saying, thus deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the, like Suta Goswami is saying, that Arjun deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord. Arjun's mind became pacified and free of all material contamination. So two words have been used. Shanta. Shanta means pacified. And second is Vimala. Vimala means free of material contamination. So we discussed this, that how can Arjun have any material contamination? And what is that contamination that we refer to? In Prabhupada's purports, we see Prabhupada is making this section most relevant to each one of us. And he says, like, any time he is actually making the point that we can actually turn, particularly in the time of distress, we can turn to the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, instructions of Krishna, meditate on those instructions, and immediately find pacification in those instructions, right? So Prabhupada in the purport actually makes the point that Krishna, Surya Sama Maya hai Andhakar. So as soon as there is sun, we meditate upon Krishna, the appearance of Krishna in the mind of a devotee, then all the miserable material effects are washed away. Right? So we can make this a nice point, that we can think that how Krishna is like the sun. So in our heart, anarthas, there's ignorance. When the sun of Krishna arises, then there is no chance of any. So particularly when we are distressed, we are, we get so many challenges and so many ups and downs in our lives. So particularly when you're feeling low in our life, meditate on Krishna's instructions. And by meditating upon Krishna's instructions, we are actually inviting Krishna in our mind, right? And then when Krishna's presence in our mind is there, then certainly there is no question of any kind of contamination or distress in our heart. Right? And Prabhupada also points out that that feeling of separation that Arjuna was actually experiencing with Krishna, that is actually transcendental. And that feeling of separation is actually a cause of our transcendental bliss. Now, how that feeling of separation, how the crying of the gopis is the cause of the highest pleasure, well, it's difficult for us to understand at this point, right? But at least we accept on the authority of Shastra that how the feeling of separation from Krishna is actually a source of bliss. Okay. And text 29, he further says that remembrance of Krishna it increased in intensity, rapidly increased his devotion. So the word Ramhasa means great velocity, and Paribhrimita, it expanded. The remembrance of Krishna expanded with great velocity. And then he says all the trash in his thoughts subsided. So, okay, and Prabhupada actually talks about what is the trash in our mind? The trash in our mind is all the material desires. And because of those material desires, we actually get reactions to those material desires. And those reactions to material desire further create trash in our mind. Material desire is itself trash. We are trying to fulfill those material desires. That's like accumulating more and more trash. So Prabhupada makes that point in the purport. And then Prabhupada says that all that trash, that is accumulated for lifetime can actually be eradicated when we get in touch with the Lord in his variegated energies by devotional service. So by devotional service, we are contacting ourselves with the different energies of the Lord. And by that spiritual, transcendental contact, all the trash in our mind can be washed away. And then Prabhupada says, if we are actually gradually coming to a stage where we have constant association with Krishna, right? So initially it is the remembrance is there, and then we forget, we have forgetfulness of that association with Krishna, and then again we remember. So it is kind of that stage of Vimala, which is actually Chakravarti Pad actually says, it is unsteadiness, right? And so we think about Krishna and then something, Maya, like we go back and forth. But when that association with Krishna becomes constant, then Prabhupada says what happens is our intelligence is actually becomes pacified. And when the intelligence is pacified, then our true color of eternal association with Krishna becomes manifest. So beautiful, Prabhupada is saying. So what is happening? When the intelligence is pacified, then what is our real association, our real relationship with Krishna? That is actually revealed to us by the mercy of Guru and by the mercy of the Mahamantra. Right? What is our eternal? Yes, our general, we say, Jivera Swarupa Krishnera Nityadas. But beyond that, what is the specific relationship with Krishna? That is actually gradually revealed to us. Okay. Then in text 30, he says, because of the Lord's pastimes and activities and because of his absence, it appeared that Arjuna forgot this instruction. But actually, this was not the case. And again, he became Prabhu. Prabhu means what? Master of the senses. Right? So again, he became Prabhu. So Prabhupada also in this purport, and Chakravarti Pad is also explaining that at that time, so he was thinking about Krishna's instructions, and that absorption increased with great velocity, and then Arjuna started singing the instructions. So the Sanskrit word Geetam, which is there in text 30, the first word, Gita means what? To sing. When you say Bhagavad Gita, it means a divine song, right? So you're singing. So it's actually saying, Prabhupada also makes a point that, but on the contrary, he revived his consciousness of the songs of the Lord, right? And Chakravarti Pad is saying that he's actually singing the instructions of him, right? And Prabhupada points out that how in Bhagavad Gita it's man mana bhava mad bhakta mad yaji mam namaskuru mam eveshesi satyamte pratijani kiyo asi. Right? So this verse is actually, you'll see Chakravarti Pad and also Prabhupada repeating in this section until the end of this chapter, saying that this is the core essential verse where we, Krishna is telling in Bhagavad Gita, man mana bhava mad bhakta, we actually think about Krishna. So what is that thinking about Krishna? That is actually demonstrated by Arjuna. And later on we see when Yudhishthira Maharaj is actually, after he hears all this and says, okay, now is the time to go back to Godhead. Again, he's actually focusing on this verse, man mana bhava bhakta, how we can think about Krishna. And then Chakravarti Pad also goes ahead and says, when Krishna says, Mam eveshasi, right? In the future, you will come to me. That's actually, he's referring to a time when now Arjuna is going to think about Krishna and then he's going to come back to Krishna. Right? And Chakravarti Pad also makes another point here that he says that in this verse, it actually proves the point that there was no material contamination in Arjuna. Why? Because he's saying that even from the time of birth, that bhakti was arisen in the consciousness of Arjuna. So there was no question, no question of any material contamination. So Chakravarti says, okay, he's an eternal associate of the Lord. So no contamination. We consider him as an Amsha of Indra. There's no question of contamination, right? So the contamination, which is actually apparent contamination that actually said in his word, is actually Arjun's thinking that yes, Krishna is my intimate friend, but now I no longer have that friendship with him. So that is the contamination, because that intimate friendship with Krishna was still available to Arjun, right? And how was that available? Through the instructions, through Krishna's energies, through Krishna's remembrance. So that, and Prabhupada says, this is that Advaya Gyan Tattva. Advaya Gyan means non-different philosophy. And Prabhupada says, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually propagating this Advaya Gyan Tattva, that when we think about Krishna, when we chant Krishna's name, when we are reading about Krishna, they are all non-different from Krishna. So Arjun's contamination, thinking that now I cannot have that intimate friendship with Krishna, that is the contamination. But now, after remembering those instructions, now I feel, oh, now again, I can actually have that intimate friendship with Krishna even right now. It's not that I have to change my body and then I will have that intimate friendship. I can have that intimate friendship relationship right now. Right? So that's the point. Prabhupada explains and Acharya explains. And towards the end of the purport of 30, Prabhupada says, one should therefore adjust, the last sentence, should therefore adjust the activities of life in pace with the mission of the Lord. And by doing this, one is sure to return back home, back to God. Right? So we should dovetail, what's that, Prabhupada? Our activities of the life should be in pace with the mission of the Lord. Right? So what is the mission of the Lord? Right? So just reading this sentence, it says you have to dovetail your activities in line with the mission of the Lord. What is the mission of the Lord for us? Who wants to say? Someone would like to unmute.
To reclaim the devotees back to Godhead.
Okay, so one thing is to reclaim the fallen souls. Krishna comes out again and again. So if we are actually somehow instruments to distribute this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, to distribute Bhagavatam, to give this in Krishna consciousness to others, then yes, that is the mission of it. What else? Particularly, let's think, Krishna has appeared again just 500 years before. That's just like yesterday in the form of Lord Chaitanya. Right? So what is our mission in terms of what is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu given us that instruction? What is our mission of life in terms of Chaitanya? Okay.
Spread Krishna consciousness around
Yes.
the world, in every village. That's his mission.
Jare dekhe tahe kahe Krishna upadesh. Wherever you get an opportunity, speak about Krishna. Right? That's the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But there's another aspect to it.
It's a prachar and prasar for Lord Krishna's name, each and every village and every
Yes.
entity.
Okay, so prachar, we got one aspect. What is the other aspect?
Prachar and prasar, or that one?
So both are preaching, right?
Yes.
To develop a love for Krishna.
There is like 2 points in Adi Lila, chapter 4. That verse actually, there's a verse that actually says there are 2 aspects to the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One is we should ourselves relish the nectar of the holy name. And second is we go and preach. So these 2 aspects, right? And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, through his personal example, is actually showing that we relish this nectar of the holy name, and then we give that nectar to others. And then there's like a whole detailed subject. Maybe, I'm sure like you all have heard that how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to repay the debt of Srimati Radharani. How like in Bhagavatam, he claims that, I cannot pay the debt of the love of the gopis, but we of Srimati Radharani. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to repay that debt, right? And how does he repay that debt? This anyway, have like hours of class just talking about this, but briefly, how do we repay that debt? One is we actually taste the nectar of Krishna, of the holy name, by chanting that holy name in the mood that is actually given by our Goswamis, given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? And tasting that nectar. And then second part, we spread the glories of Srimati Radha. And that way we repay the debt to Lord Chaitanya. So specifically for us, our mission is we ourselves have to develop our Krishna consciousness. And right? Our Prabhupada, also his main thing is, yes, give Krishna to others. First of all, we have to relish the nectar of Krishna consciousness, and the overflow of the nectar is actually preaching. So this is our mission. Okay, so if we dovetail all our activities, how can we go deeper in our absorption of Krishna consciousness, and how can we give Krishna consciousness? And then we are in line with the mission of the Lord. Okay. Okay. Now text 31. So we'll do a Sanskrit also, and I just want to keep track of the time. We are going to maybe Ratna Radhika, you can go quickly with the Sanskrit.
Text 31. Vishoka Brahma Sampatya Sanchina Dvaita Samshayaha Lina Prakritir Nirgunyad Alingatvada Sambhavaha.
Okay, so the list is there. I think we start with Arundhati Mataji, let's read the translations, and then Divyanita Elena Mataji, and then Gopinath.
Thanks. Because of his possessing spiritual assets, the doubts of duality were completely cut off. Thus, he was freed from the three modes of material nature and placed in transcendence. There was no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death, for he was freed from material form.
So, so the word Brahma Sampatya is actually very important, right? Brahma Sampatya means spiritual assets. Right? So we can actually understand this Brahma Sampatya. Like this entire verse is very beautiful. Brahma Sampatya, accumulating spiritual assets. Every aspect of our devotional service. What are we doing? We are accumulating spiritual credits. We are accumulating our spiritual bank balance. Every mantra we chant, every second, we are actually engaged in activities, devotional activities. We are actually accumulating our spiritual bank balance. Right? So if you want to grow in this spiritual bank balance, spiritual assets, then two things. One is you have to engage in activities of devotional service. And second, we have to increase our absorption in the activities of devotional service. Because we could do devotional activities, but more maybe we are doing physically. We are doing the activity, but we are thinking of something else. I'm sure everyone has the experience. Chanting Hare Krishna, but you're thinking of everything else except Krishna. So we have to, one is engage in activities of devotional service. Second is increase the absorption in these activities. And when we are doing these two, then we are accumulating this Brahma Sampatya, right? And as we are the spiritual bank balance grows, then what happens? This verse is actually telling us we are gradually elevating ourselves above the three modes of material nature and coming to the level of transcendence. Right? Krishna makes the same point in Bhagavad Gita, right? Mamchoya Vyavicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Sa Gunan Samiteta. We actually rise above all the gunas, right? Sa Gunan Samiteta. We come to a stage of transcendence, of Brahman, right? So by accumulating these spiritual assets, incrementally, like every aspect of our devotion, every mantra we chant is actually like a precious gem that we are depositing in our spiritual life. Right? And when that account grows, then we actually rise above the three modes of material nature. And then this verse says, Dvaita Samshaya. Dvaita Samshaya means the doubts of relativity. So by accumulating the spiritual credits, all the doubts in our heart, all the anarthas are actually washed away. Right? All the doubts of Krishna's glories, Krishna's form, and Krishna's dualities, everything is actually washed away. Okay, so, and then there was no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth of death, but he was freed from material form. So as we are accumulating, we are rising above the three modes, our doubts are going away, and then what is happening? A subtle body is actually becoming spiritualized. So Prabhupada explains this point in the purport that it is our subtle body that determines our next body that we get, right? The Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter makes this point. Based on what is our subtle body, that determines our next life, right? So if a subtle body is completely spiritualized, then there is no question of birth and death. That's exactly here. It says there's no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death. Right? And he was freed from the material. So a subtle body, when it is spiritualized, then there is no question of repeated birth and death. Right? So Prabhupada in the purport, he says, the most foolish path of our ignorance, the most foolish path of our ignorance. Yes, there is ignorance. Om Agyanati Miranda say, right? We are all in ignorance. What is the most foolish part of this? Is our identifying ourselves with our body. So Prabhupada actually says, true knowledge is what? Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Right? Everything is Vasudeva. But even I am a part of Vasudeva. But what is that ignorance? Where we think, not Vasudeva Sarvamiti, we think Aham Sarvamiti. I am everything. I am the center of this world. Ajay Bhurishan Prabhu actually made a very wonderful point recently in the, the Govardhan retreat we attended. He said, we all think that we are the center of the world. And yet you cannot convince one other person of this point that you are the center of the world. It's very interesting. Like we all think that I am the center. Try to convince one other person you are the center. No, you cannot convince anyone. And then he continued along the point, and he actually said that I used to think a lot about like what people think about me. What do people think about me? I'm very careful about my image. And slowly I realized that actually no one thinks of anyone except themselves. Everyone thinks that they're in the center of the world. So no one has even time to think that what they think about me. So I think those are two nice points. But so Prabhupada says, so we say Aham Sarvamiti, to true knowledge is Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Right? Vasudeva is everything. So Prabhupada makes that point in the Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada actually explains the point that I said, that here Prabhupada explains. He says like how Arjun, he was thinking that he cannot have that association, intimate friendship with Krishna because Krishna has departed. But he could realize that the Lord was still present before him by his instruction, by his form, by his pastimes, by his qualities, and everything else related to him. Right? So here Prabhupada is explaining that point, that Arjun was now realizing, no, even right now I can associate with Krishna. Okay. And Prabhupada says that even we can have that same association with Krishna. One can see him, one can feel his presence, even in this present life, simply by understanding this Advaya Gyan, this non-dual knowledge. That Krishna is non-different from his name. Krishna is non-different from his pastimes. Krishna is non-different from his association. So even we can have that association with Krishna. And then for Prabhupada says, what is our processes? Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And constantly if we chant, then we wash away, Cheto Darpana Marjam, that happens. And then gradually we come to the situation, the absolute knowledge, the material contamination is all washed away. Okay. And then this verse actually talks about the position of Vishoka. Vishoka means free from bereavement. And he says, when we actually accumulate that Brahma Sampata through the points he has explained in the purport, then we come to this platform of Vishoka. Vishoka means no longer there will be Shoka in our life. No longer there will be sadness in our life. So as we are gradually accumulating these spiritual credits, our Brahma Sampati is actually increasing, then our Shoka is actually going. Right? Okay, so one point just to elaborate on this, like how Prabhupada is saying that we can still have the association with Krishna right now, and what was Arjun's contamination. So this is a final verse in the section. So I'll just give another example, maybe we can relate more. So this I heard from Madhavananda Prabhu. He was telling that one of his god sisters, disciple of Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj. So after Maharaj left, he left his pastimes here, then she came to actually Bhubaneswar, and then someone showed her some photos of Maharaj's final pastime and his departing, and she was looking at the photos and she was crying and crying and crying, and then that was like every day she was just like looking, oh, my Guru Maharaj has left me, and Guru Maharaj has left me. and she was crying. And then one day, like, I'm forgetting the specific detail. I was trying to look this, but I heard it sometime back. But anyway, the point is that either Maharaj came to her in a dream, or just she could hear Maharaj's voice saying that I am still here. I am still here. And then she realized, no, well, Maharaj has not left me. He's still here. When it is only us that we actually said, oh, Maharaj is gone, and then like, the point is we can still receive instructions from a spiritual personality. The spiritual personality will still speak to you. We can still have that association, right? And that was the story that Madhava Prabhu was saying, that after that she realized, no, my Guru Maharaj is right here. She just put all those photos of the final departure away, and then she started serving Maharaj in the kingdom of operation. So it was like, a story touched me, and I've been thinking a lot about that particular story. But that's the point. So Arjun was feeling the same. You're saying that, oh, Krishna has left me, but no, he's still here, right? So similarly, you can relate it, with our Guru Jans. So that point I want to make. Okay, so after this, so that's that entire section where Arjun is focusing on the Lord. We understand what's Arjun's contamination, all those things, and Arjun's relationship. And then this point about Brahma Sampati, like, very important point. Okay, so now we move on to the next section, where Maharaj Yudhishthira, he actually hears all this from Arjun, and then he says, okay, now time to pack up my bags, go back home. Any questions up to this point? It's okay, this section? Yeah, we move ahead. Okay. So next, text 32.
32. Nishamya Bhagavan Margam Samstam Yadukurasya cha Svapathaya Matim Chakre Nibritatma Yudhishthiraha.
Translation. Upon hearing of Lord Krishna's returning to his abode, and upon understanding the end of Yadu dynasty's earthly manifestations, Maharaj Yudhishthira decided to go back home, back to Godhead.
It's so interesting how Prabhupada translates it. So he decided to go back home, back to God. And actually, I was recently hearing two stories actually of, one was about Vaishnava in South India. He was on the Sri Sampradaya, and he was like the head of the mutt, his mutt for like 80 years, so long time. And then it was, almost he was old, and then he was thinking like, okay, it was time for him to leave, but his health was all okay. But one day he just came in the morning and he asked his disciples, what is the tithi today? And they said, today is Makar Sankranti. So today is Makar Sankranti, right? And he said, yes, today. And then he just went back to his room, chanting, back home, back to God. He was just waiting for the tithi. And I'm making this point that devotees, they have the power. They can just decide, okay, now time to go. Right? And there's another story I heard in Vrindavan. There was this nice devotee, and he had like so many cows. He used to take care of the cows, and very elevated devotee. And one day he saw one of the cows, instead of milk, she was giving blood. And then he asked another person, he said, like, the cow instead of milk, she's giving blood. What does this mean? And the other person said, that means it's time for her to leave. Her death is close. So this person, he was so attached to cows, and saying like, no, cows are so dear to Krishna. So if this cow leaves, it will not be pleasing to Krishna. So he actually did this. He actually said, either in meditation or, he prayed to Krishna and said, give my life to that cow. And he actually, just that day, he left, and then cow, she actually lived for a very long time. So both these stories point that how Vaishnavas, they have that, okay, now it's time to leave. So here Yudhishthira Maharaj is saying, he decided to go back home, back to God. There is no question like, okay, when my time comes, he said, okay, Abhi, Krishna has left, that's it, right? Yadus have, so here, actually two things are explained. One is said, Samstam Yadu Kulasya. Samstam means end of the Yadu dynasty. And second one is Bhagwat Margam. Bhagwat Margam means the disappearance of Lord Krishna. So both these incidents, when he heard, and he said, okay, time to go back home, back to God. Now Prabhupada in the purport explains that this, when it says that Nisamya, deliberating, that Yudhishthira was thinking about this, one needs to understand that the appearance and disappearance of the Lord, is just like the appearance and disappearance of the sun. Right? When the sun sets, it's not that the sun is no longer present. He's just not visible to our vision. Right? So similarly, when the Krishna winds up his pastime, he still performs his pastime elsewhere. Right? And we know this, right? How Prabhupada explains this, that Krishna performs one pastime here, and then another moment in another universe, another pastime is taking place. Right? So right now, in some other material universe, Krishna is lifting Giriraj Govardhan. Right? In another universe, Krishna is actually killing Putana. Delivering Putana. So all these pastimes are continuously happening. Just like the sun, okay, now it is 7:45 here. After 1 hour, it will be 7:45 somewhere else. Right? So similarly, all those pastimes are continuously taking place. So Prabhupada actually makes the point. So the disappearance of the Lord, which Yudhishthira Maharaj heard, he was nisamya, he was deliberating, and he understood that this disappearance is actually a pastime of the Lord. Right? So Prabhupada explains that point. And then he quotes the famous verse, Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam, who actually understands the birth and the activities of the Lord. Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam, that they are transcendental. Right? Then Tapta Deham Punam Janma, 90 Mameti. So he doesn't have to come back to this material world. Okay, next text.
Text 33. Pritapyanushrutya dhananjayotitam nasham yadunam bhagavad gatim chatam ekanta bhaktya bhagavatya dokshaje niveshitatmo pararama samshrite.
Kunti, after overhearing Arjuna's telling of the end of the Yadu dynasty and disappearance of Lord Krishna, engaged in the devotional service of the transcendental personality of Godhead with full attention, and thus gained release from the course of material existence.
So the verse starts with Pritha. Who is Pritha? Kunti. Right? So even Kunti heard all this that Arjuna said. Right? And then one important thing, which is actually repeatedly we see in the next few shlokas, is Ekanta Bhakti. Ekanta Bhakti means one-pointed devotion. Ekanta Bhakti, Bhagavati Adokshada, referring to Krishna. So one-pointed, unalloyed devotional service to Krishna. So when Kunti actually heard this, right, the entire thing about the disappearance of Krishna, and again here it says, Nasam Yadunam, the destruction, the end of the Yadu dynasty, and Bhagavad Gati, the disappearance of Lord Krishna, then she engaged herself in Ekanta Bhaktya, engaged in devotional service with full attention. And hence, Uparama Samskrita, she gained release from material. Now, Prabhupada in the purport actually says that we have to get a passport to go back home, back to God. Right? Without your passport, you cannot even leave your home country. Right? So even we have to prepare, apply to get a passport to go home, back to God. Prabhupada in this purport, he says twice, he makes the point that Kunti, she actually had that passport to go back home, back to God. And what is that passport? That passport is that Ekanta Bhaktya, that undeviated or complete absorption in Krishna is our passport to go back home. Complete absorption in Krishna is our passport to go back home. And I'll mention this point. This is it's a wonderful point. It's a very powerful point. That when we are doing our japa, it is our time to practice this Ekanta Bhakti. And Madhav Prabhu actually, someone asked Madhav Prabhu that what does he think when his chant is, when he does kirtan? Madhav Prabhu said, that when I'm leading kirtan, I lead kirtan in such a way that every mantra, I think this is my last mantra. Think about that. That's actually, if you can practically try this out in your life, that you're chanting Hare Krishna and think that, oh, I'm just going to leave my body and this is the last mantra I'm chanting. If that's the case, would you actually think about like so many other things that we think about, my to-do list, our attachment, oh, I am this, I have to do this duty, so on. Right? It says the last mantra, I'm just going to leave after this mantra. My life is over. What would be our absorption? And hence this ekanta bhakti, like how Prabhupada says, this is our passport, right? We can, every time we are chanting a japa, we are actually preparing, we are applying for that passport. That finally, when that moment comes, we are ready. Our passport is all ready, and we can show and say, yes, this is our passport. Go back home, right? So Prabhupada twice in this purport, he makes the point of passport. He says, last towards the end of the purport, that one must prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead by practicing devotional service. That guarantees the passport for going back home, back to Godhead. And Kunti adopted it. Kunti adopted that process and she had the passport and she could go back home. Next verse.
Text 34. Yayaharad bhuvo bharam tam tanum vijahavajaha kantakam kantake neva dvayam chapi shitu samam.
Translation, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The Supreme Unborn Lord Shri Krishna caused the members of the Yadu dynasty to relinquish their bodies, and thus he relieved the burden of the world. This action was like picking out a throne with a throne, though both are the same to the controller.
So if you see like previous verse and this verse, what is the connection? Like now one would say that, okay, we already discussed about the disappearance of the entire Yadu dynasty. But now why again Suta Goswami is talking about this? The next few verses he'll be elaborating on this. So Prabhupada explains this point in the purport that yes, Suta Goswami was explaining how Yudhishthira Maharaj decided to go back home, back to Godhead, how Queen Kunti, she had the passport, one pointed attention, she went back home, she disappeared. But he was seeing that all the sages of Naimisharanya were actually in grief. They were displeased that how the Yadus could actually fight amongst each other and leave. How is it possible? They are actually associates of the Lord. So Suta Goswami was seeing that all the sages were actually in grief. And hence, he actually changed the topic and he actually spent the next 3-4 verses where he's going to talk about that how the Yadus fought and they left. That, one way it seems like, for a dynasty, to actually fight amongst each other and leave, that is actually not very glorious. If someone is fighting against another powerful enemy and then leaving, that's something. But fighting amongst each other, that's not very glorious. Right? So all the Shaunakadi Rishi were thinking that, how is this possible? And then here, Suta Goswami explains, right? So he actually, in 34, he makes the point. He says, the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna caused, right? See the word caused, right? So this actually even Prabhupada again stresses in the purport that this is all the plan of Lord Shri Krishna. Why the Yadus actually acted in this way and why they disappeared. And we discussed this last time also. The Yadus were so powerful that who could actually defeat them? Right? Who could actually defeat them? Right? And Krishna had to wrap up the pastime. So he actually he caused this entire thing to happen. Right? And then we discussed this point of relieve the burden of the world. Right? You remember last time we talked there's a burden of beast and the burden of love. Right? So a woman wearing ornaments, though it is heavy, it is a burden of love. So similarly that point. And then he says, this action was picking out a thorn with a thorn. Although for the controller, they are both the same. Right? What does this mean? Right? I think we all have that experience that if you have a thorn, and I've seen like you take a needle or another pointed object to take out the thorn. Right? So you're taking a thorn with another thorn. So how does this apply in this case of Krishna, making the, how Suta Goswami is explaining this, and he's actually saying, well, to take out the Yadavas, who else can take out? Just to take out a thorn, only you need another pointed object to take out the thorn. Otherwise, you cannot take it out. Similarly, the Yadavas, to wind up their pastime, how was it possible? Only through the Yadavas. Like how a thorn can be taken up, only by so only through the Yadavas, he actually took it up. So that example is given. And though both are the same to the controller. So Prabhupada explains this point. He's saying, and Prabhupada takes it in one additional direction, and he's saying that actually every living entity is connected with the Lord, and there are two kinds of these thorns. One kind of thorn is actually referring to the Suras, and another kind of thorn is referring to the Asura. But from the Lord perspective, both the Suras and the Asuras, the demigods and the demons, are both children of the Lord. So from the controller point of view, both of them are same, right? But one of the thorn is actually causing pain, and another thorn is actually relieving the pain, right? The Prabhupada so wonderfully says, so when we use that example of thorn taking out the thorn, one thorn is causing pain. So the Asuras, they actually, are not in line with the mission of the Lord. But the Suras, they are like the thorn which is taking out the thorn, right? And so finally we have to decide, are we the pinprick thorn or are we the service giving thorn to Krishna? Who are we, right? What is our activities? Are we actually the pinprick thorn or we are the service giving? Okay, so we can go to the next verse.
Text 35. Yatha matsyadi rupani date jayada yatha nataha bhubhara kshapito yena jaho tachcha kalevaram.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The Supreme Lord relinquished the body which he manifested to diminish the burden of the earth. Just like a magician, he relinquishes one body to accept the different ones, like the fish incarnation and the others. Hare Krishna.
So this section is what Suta Goswami is trying to convince Sonakadi Rishi, that Krishna's disappearance, Yadava's disappearance, it's all Krishna's pastime, right? So don't be in grief, don't be disturbed by this, right? This is all Krishna. So here, after talking about how the Yadavas, how they actually, when they fought with each other, it's all Krishna caused it. It's called Krishna's plan. So don't be in grief because of that, like how it happened, right? But the reason behind why it happened, that's more important. And I think I mentioned this last time, right? Every associate of the Lord has an amsha of a demigod, right? I mentioned it, right? So basically, when they went to Prabhas, it was that amsha that went, and it was the amsha that fought, and they regained their demigod position. But those who are the eternal associate, they actually stayed back in Dwarka, and they entered into the aprakat lila, right? So everyone understands this. So in in the Dham, there's prakat lila and aprakat. What is actually happening when Krishna is personally present and he's actually showing his pastimes. And now what lila is happening, it is still happening, but it is not visible to the right? So aprakat. So they actually entered into the aprakat. Right? So that's how they disappeared. Now how about the Lord, right? So this entire pastime is more described in the 11th canto. How that hunter, like Krishna was cursed, and the hunter thought that it was a deer, right? Deer. I forget. He saw Krishna's foot and he thought it was a deer, and then he shot an arrow. And it is said that, oh, that arrow caused Krishna's departure. But it is that exactly to explain that point, here it is said, just like a magician, he relinquishes one body to accept other ones, like a fish incarnation and others. Right? So when Krishna actually departed, one way we cannot say Krishna departed because it's always there. But when Krishna showed this final pastime of how the hunter's arrow was shot on his foot, right? So that was just like a magician. A magician on the stage may actually show that his body is there, but all of a sudden the body is not there, or his body is burned, or they show the trick that the body is there, and all of a sudden something goes in center, and the body is cut into pieces. Right? So they show all these tricks. But that is, but behind the magician is still there. After the show is over, he'll just come back and be like, oh, here I am. Thank you so much for watching, or something like that. He's still there, right? Similarly, Krishna shows all these tricks. And the people who are watching, they are bewildered. Oh, Krishna left. How can, by an arrow, Krishna can leave? How is it possible? They are bewildered, just like a magician may bewilder the audience. Right? So that example is good. And particularly the Matsya Adi, the verse says, Yatha Matsya Adi Rupani. So just like the fish incarnation. The fish incarnation appears, it shows the pastimes, the purpose for which it's appearing is actually shown. And after that, the pastime disappears. And the Rupani, the Matsya Avatar, it disappears from this pastime. But that does not mean that Matsya Avatar is not there somewhere else. First of all, in the Vaikuntha planets, all these different incarnations are eternally present. Avatar means they just descend, they show their pastime, they go back, right? So the forms are eternally present. Like, sometimes we get this question that like people ask question in terms of the time that how do we understand that Krishna is a source when Rama came before Krishna? They ask such questions. Lord Ramchandra came before Krishna, so how can we say that Krishna is the source of everything? So, they are not understanding the point that the forms of Krishna are always eternally present. Right? They are always so that point is actually explained in this one. Now, Prabhupada in the purport is actually quoting from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and he's actually saying that how to consider the form of Krishna as material is actually what? Mayavadi. To consider the form of Krishna as Maya is Mayavadi. And Prabhupada explains, but Chakravarti Pada is actually quoting that verse, where it says that one who actually sees a Mayavadi should jump into the river with their clothes on. It's good that Prabhupada didn't instruct us to follow this, otherwise you would always be inside the water because there are Mayavadis everywhere. So Prabhupada quotes that. So very strong, he's making this point about to consider Krishna's body as material is actually the greatest offense. Right? The Mayavadi, Krishna Aparadi, they are actually committing an offense to Krishna. And then Prabhupada explains the idea is that the Lord does not create these forms. These forms are eternally present, they descend. Right? So it is said that Krishna, when he actually showed that final pastime, he left a body there. What kind of body was it? It was just like how a magician may leave a body. Right? So there was a body that was left, and then Krishna wrapped up his pastime. But one should not be bewildered by these points. And Prabhupada quotes 724, where I said, Avyaktam Vyaktim Apannam Manyate Mam Abudaya Param Bhavam Ajananto Mavavayam Anutamam. That only Ajananto, that only unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed a personality. Right? Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. 724 clearly. So if we meet a Mayavadi, this is the verse you can open. Open 724. Directly Krishna is saying, those who think that I was impersonal before and I have assumed the form, they are actually unintelligent. So you can just read the verse and you can say, this is your level of. Okay. And then Prabhupada in the purport also quotes one more incident that when Krishna actually he entered into the arena in Mathura to kill all the wrestlers and Kamsa, there's a beautiful verse in the 10th canto 43rd chapter where it says that as Krishna entered into the assembly, people saw him in different ways, and there are 10 different reactions actually explained. Right? So it is explained that how the wrestlers, they saw Krishna as a lightning bolt. Then the men of Mathura, they thought Krishna as the best of all men. The women, they saw Krishna as Cupid personified. Right? And then the cowherd men, they saw Krishna, oh, this is our own relative coming in. The impious rulers, they saw Krishna as chastiser. His parents saw, oh, this is our child, Krishna. The king of Bhojas, they saw, oh, now death personified has entered. The unintelligent, as the Supreme Lord's universal form, oh, they thought the Virat Rupa has now come. The yogis thought the absolute truth has come, and the Vrishnis thought, oh, our most worshipful deity has come. So the same Krishna is just entering, and 10 different categories of people are seeing Krishna in 10 different ways. Right? So, why is Prabhupada quoting this thing in the purport? He's making the point that when these wrestlers are seeing Krishna as lightning bolt, right? That is just like a magician showing something. Right? When the Vrishnis see Krishna as a worshipful Lord, their vision is perfect vision. Right? So people can have a most unintelligent vision, and Krishna people can have a vision of devotion. Right? So to the unintelligent, when Krishna leaves his body, it is actually fooling the unintelligent. Like, oh, Krishna's form is material. But for the devotees, this final disappearance pastime is basically like, oh, just like the sun has set. But that doesn't mean the sun is not there. Krishna is there. I can still have association with Krishna by thinking about the instructions, by remembering him, by meditating on him, by chanting his names, and so on. Okay. Text 35.
Text 36. Yada Mukundo Bhagavanima Mahim Jaho Swatandva Shravaniya Tatskataha Tada Hareva Pratibhuda Chetasam Abhadrahetu Kaliran Vartata.
Hare Krishna. Translation. When the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form that very day, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge.
So again, to actually make the point, Swatanva, Krishna actually, how he disappeared? In the very same body. So we see in these verses now, Suta Goswami is now continuing the pastime of Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas' final departure, which is this chapter. But again, he's stressing on the point that Krishna actually, he left with his very same body. So Swatanva, right? Now, the verse is very beautiful. It says, Yada Mukunda Jaho Tada Kali Anvavartata. Right? So Yada and Tada. So Yada what? So when Krishna actually departed, right? Tada, at that time, what happened? Kali Anvavartata. Kali Anvavartata means Kali become fully manifested. Right? So actually it is said at the end of the battle of Kurukshetra, Kali was present, but he could not show his influence as long as Krishna was on this planet. But when Krishna departed, Yada, Krishna Jao, when Krishna departed, then Kali actually started showing, became fully manifested. And then it says, Aprati Buddha Chetasam. Kali actually started influencing those who were Aprati Buddha Chetasam. That basically means those who were, Prabhupada said in the purport, endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains that those who were not developed in their Krishna consciousness, to those people, Kali actually manifested. And the point Prabhupada explains that if we are completely Krishna consciousness, there is no question of the influence of Kali. Right? There is no question of influence of Kali. So as we are purifying ourselves by this process of devotional service, then the influence of Kali upon us will actually, Kali will have gradually no influence upon us. But in a sadhaka state, we still see that there may be influence of Kali. And the main way that the influence of Kali manifests, particularly for us devotees, is through what? Through the mood of quarrel. Kali itself means kala. Kala means quarrel. Right? So even among devotees, like how Prabhupada said, that nothing can destroy this movement from outside. only by within, if devotees fight amongst each other, then that could be lost, there could be some damage to this movement. So Kali manifests through us in the form of Kaurav, and hence Prabhupada stressed so much on the mode of cooperation. You will show your love for me by how you cooperatively work in this ISKCON society, in this institution. Right? So that's why Prabhupada stressed on this mode of cooperation, because Kali influence will come in the form of Kaurav. Okay, next verse.
Text 37. Yudhishthirastat parisarpanam buddha pure charashtre chagrihe tatapmani vibhavya lobhanrita jimma himsanari adharma chakram gamanaya paryadhat.
Maharaj Yudhishthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating, and violence throughout the capital, state, home, and among individuals. So he wisely prepared himself to leave home, and he dressed accordingly.
We just made the point that for pure devotees, Kali's influence does not affect them. So why is Maharaj Yudhishthira saying that, oh, now Kali has come, I'm going to finish my pastime? So why is that? Maharaj Yudhishthira should, is like how we hear, we'll be reading in the next chapter, how Parikshit, he saw Kali's influence, what did he do? Took up a sword. He said, yes, now opportunity to fight. I'm going to fight Kali. I'm going to destroy Kali. Right? So why did Maharaj Yudhishthira not do the same? And then pure devotees are not affected by the influence of Kali. So what's the answer? Anyone like to say something? Prabhupada makes 2 points in the purport.
Prabhu, we had the same question when we were reading the first or second chapter also, right? That why Parikshit Maharaj did not. So the answer was because he knew that Kali is supposed to progress as per the Kala Chakra. And so that's why Maharaj Yudhishthira also.
Yes. So in that purport, it said, why did Parikshit not ask for the favor of the Lord because the Lord protected him? Because the Lord does not ask undue favor, and he knew that Kali's influence is a period of time, so he doesn't want to interfere. Here, in this, Prabhupada gives 2 answers. So why Yudhishthira Maharaj, seeing the influence of Kali, he wisely prepared himself to leave home. Why did he do that? He gives 2 answers. One is that Yudhishthira is an eternal associate of the Lord. Right? So wherever the Lord is next performing the pastime, Yudhishthira Maharaj wants to go and again assist the Lord in his pastime. And we see this with the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Many of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada in their Vyas Puja offering, it's like, you see like few times I've read with different devotees where they say like, Prabhupada, wherever your next place is, please, I want to come and assist in your mission. Right? So devotees, they are not even aspiring to go back home, back to Godhead. They say like, Prabhupada, wherever you are, we want to come there and we want to assist. So Yudhishthira Maharaj is saying, Krishna, now you have gone somewhere else to perform your mission. I want to come and assist. First point. Right? Second point is Yudhishthira Maharaj is showing the example for each one of us, that at the right time, one should retire from all the family engagement. Right? So that's the second point Prabhupada says, that you're setting the example that that as soon as there is a young person who can manage household affairs, one should actually retire. Very practical point. Even we can see that as soon as there is a young person who is qualified, now he can manage house affairs. He's taking care of the family, the business, and everything. Okay, that means I should start planning my retirement. So those 2 points. Okay. Now other points in this verse, it says, what did Maharaj experience? Buddha thoroughly experienced. One is Pure. Pure means capital. So where was Kali's influence? One, in the capital, Pure. Second, Rashtra, in the state. Right. So it was capital, the entire state. Then Grihe, at home. And then Atmani. Atmani means in the person. So we see how Kali is so powerful, that it actually starts off influencing us from within. Right? And then it affects the capital, the state, and then Kali's influence is all over. Right? So that's also Yudhishthira Maharaj could see that in all these 4 places, Kali's influence was there. And what is Kali's symptoms? Lobha, Anrita, Jimha, Himsana, Adharma. That's all Kali's influence. So Lobha means avarice, greed, untruth, diplomacy, violence, irreligion, envy. So these are the influences of Kali. So Maharaj Yudhishthira saw all this, that people are in general in their behavior, they're more greedy, there's falsehood, there's diplomacy, there's cheating, there is violence, and all this he could see, and hence he decided, okay, now that is time to leave home, and then he dressed accordingly. Now Prabhupada actually says that now we have passed only 5,000 years of Kali Yuga. And still, now after 5,000 years, we are seeing such a strong influence of violence, corruption, greed, cheating. It's all prominent. And Prabhupada says we cannot even imagine what will be the state after 427,000 years of Kali Yuga. It's still like, imagine 5,000 years is so much Kali Yuga has progressed. Imagine 427,000. The Prabhupada says we cannot even imagine. So one way for us, practical, I was thinking like, now itself Kali Yuga is so horrible. Cow slaughter everywhere. It's just like people are killing babies in the womb. Like it's so dangerous. Like it's just, the whole world is so, So at least for us, one motivation is like, as soon as possible, get out of this. The sooner the better. I don't want to come back in this Kali Yuga again. We come back more further in time, more degraded. Who knows, we take birth and then say more. But it is so worse, we cannot even imagine, and it's getting worse and worse. And Prabhupada, in these purports, he actually stresses on the point about voluntary retirement. He said one should not be, hold on to the king until the last moment of his life. That, okay, now I'm going to die, and now you say, okay, now you become the king. No. At a particular time, voluntary retirement. Right? And Prabhupada stresses these points again and again. And we'll read more in the next few verses. Don't, okay, I'll come to that. The next purpose, Prabhupada talks more. So at that time, I'll explain. Okay? And here in this purpose, Prabhupada says, as soon as a young fellow to look after the household, one should immediately retire. Okay? One should not rot in the dark well of household life. Adantar Gobir Vishnam Tarisham Puna Chavitam. So Prahlad Maharaj actually compared this Grihastha ashram, Grihamedi ashram, to a deep dark well, where there is no water. So at a particular time, these shlokas should stand out to us more. Okay, now, like, yes, okay, now there's Grihastha ashram, we do the duties of Grihastha ashram, but at a particular say, okay, that's it. Now's the time to start cultivating detachment from all these things and engaging more in Krishna's service. Next verse.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Can I ask one quick question, if you don't mind? So why it says when Maharaj Yudhishthira was preparing to leave, why he has to dress accordingly? The translation it says he was wisely prepared himself to leave home and he dressed accordingly.
So basically, that is actually referring to he gave up his dress of a king.
Oh, got it.
Because he was dressed like he was the emperor of the entire world. So he externally gave up that dress of a king and took up simple clothes, just preparing for the forest.
Okay, got it.
So that's okay. Next one.
Text 38. Sarat potram vinayinam atmana susamam ganai taya nivyapatim humer avyasinchat gajavaye. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapur, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas.
Right, so he enthroned his Pautram. Pautram who? Parikshit. So he immediately said, okay, now my time has come. He enthroned Parikshit Maharaj. And then the qualities of Parikshit Maharaj are given. He was trained and equally qualified. Right? Atmanaha susasam gunaihi. Like gunaihi means qualities. Susasam, equal in all respects. So we read previously also how Yudhishthira Maharaj, he actually asked the qualities of of Parikshit Maharaj and how the people at the time of the birth, they predicted that he'll be as good as, and we read all those, as good as Lord Ram in this, as good as in charity, he'll be as good as this person, and so on, right? So all those qualities. So he was as equally qualified as the Pandavas, and then he was trained properly. So that's another point, that while we are actually in Grihastha Ashram, we are training. We are training the next generation that, okay, soon you have to take up all these responsibilities, because my time, I'm not going to be here until my end of my life. You have to take up. So he trained Parikshit Maharaj, was well trained. And yeah, and then Prabhupada says, emperor of the world. How can, Maharaj Yudhishthira was the emperor and then Parikshit was the emperor? And the main reason, Prabhupada says, because the citizens were very happy. So they accepted one emperor. And how can the citizens be happy? Ample production of national produce like grains, fruits, milks, herbs, stones, and so on. Like it's not so much of all these gadgets and technology and all those things. What gives real happiness to us? If we have like nice food, nice grains, we are sufficiently fed. And then also Prabhupada said, when all these things are taken care nicely, then the citizens are free from all bodily miseries, anxieties of mind, disturbances by natural phenomena, and so on. Right? So what's the main secret here? Maharaj Yudhishthira and Maharaj Parikshit, they are actually unalloyed devotees of the Lord. So by their mood of devotion, they are actually pleasing Krishna. When Krishna is pleased, all the demigods are pleased. And then everything, no natural disturbances, and rainfall is insufficient, rivers are flowing nicely, abundance of minerals, and then naturally everyone is satisfied. Next. Oh, one more point. Towards the end of the purport, Prabhupada actually makes the point that how Kali's influence is, it actually was, at that time he could see that citizens was Kali's influence, but we see Kali's influences among the citizens and also among the state administrators. Right? The influence is everywhere. So hence there is quarrel, right? But Prabhupada says there can still be spiritual emulation and God consciousness. That is a special prerogative. So I was reading this and I was thinking, like, what is Prabhupada referring to here? And we see how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come, and how Prabhupada said 10,000 years, which will be a golden age even in this age of Kali Yuga. There will be Satya Yuga even in this age of Kali Yuga. That is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's question. So this, and then the time period, some people say, like, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started, that was the start of Kali Yuga, and it is like kind of a plateau. So it started at that point, and now it is going. This is by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Hare Krishna movement. This is called society. Things are going to improve, even in Kali Yuga, right? So it is our, my Guru Maharaj used to always say, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is already predicted that it's going to flourish more. The only question is, do you want to be a part of it or not? If you don't be a part, still it's going to happen, right? So we have that opportunity. Somehow or other, we can be part of this and earn glory, right? How Krishna tells Arjun. And the result is already there. You fight as an instrument and earn glory, right? Yashaha, you become Yashaha. So if we actually become instruments in Prabhupada's movement, then we become glorious. Then we can go back home. Next 39.
39. Mathurayam tata vajram shurasena patim tataha prajapatyam nirupeshtim agnim api bharishvaraha.
Okay, who's next?
Radha.
Sri Radha.
Krishna. Then he posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Krishna, at Mathura as the king of Surasena. Afterwards, Maharaja Yudhishthira performed Prajapatya sacrifice and placed in himself the fire for quitting household life.
So he appointed Parikshit Maharaj as the king of Hastinapur, the emperor, and he established Vrajanav as the king of Mathura. Right? And he is the grandson, or the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Krishna. Right? So this name of Vrajanav, when you go to Vrindavan, you'll actually hear this name of Vrajanav. Why? Because it was actually Vrajanav who actually established many of the original deities, Radha Govinda, Gopinath, Madan Mohan, because he was actually this grandson of Krishna, was seeing how people were lamenting. Oh, here this pastime took place, here this pastime took place. And then Vrajnath said, no, we have to establish deities so that people, who will come generations, they can say that, oh, here this pastime was there, and here Krishna. So, and then he actually established different deities. He established Dwarpals, the protectors of the holy Dham, right? Hari Devji temple, that's also established by Vrajnath. So he established so many deities, and Uttara was there at that time. And he actually called Uttara and said, like, okay, does it look like Krishna? And then she said, yes, Madan Mohan's feet looks exactly like Krishna. Then Govinda Ji deity was established. And then Uttara said, the face of Govindji looks exactly like Krishna. Then Gopinath was established. And then she said, well, the chest of Krishna looks exactly, chest of Gopinath looks exactly like Krishna. So these are the three main personalities. And finally, 500 years before, when Radha Raman appeared, it says like Radha Raman has the feet like Madan Mohan, he has the chest like Gopinath, and he has a face like Govindji. So Radha Raman's entire form is exactly like Krishna. And that's why Radha Raman Ji deity is actually said to be the heartbeat of this body. So, side point. But Vrajnath, okay, so he was established. And then after that, Maharaj Yudhishthir was, he performed the Prajapatya sacrifice. So Prabhupada doesn't explain more about this sacrifice, but main point he says is that he decided, established a fire for quitting household life. Prabhupada talks about this point about retiring from household life, and he says everyone's life must be so arranged that the last stage, so this is somewhere in middle of the purpose, at least 15 to 20 years prior to death, can be absolutely devoted to devotional service of the Lord to attain the highest perfection. So we have to plan our life in such a way that at least last 15 to 20 years, no more family obligations. Oh, you have to do this. No. Exclusively devotional service to Lord Krishna. Right? So that's what Prabhupada is saying. And then it is really foolishness to engage oneself all the days of one's life in material enjoyment and fruitive activities. No one should follow the suicidal policy of neglecting one supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life, namely going back home. Last sentence of the purpose. No one should follow the suicidal policy. If we are ignoring that final part where we are really close to our final exam, if we are not using that part exclusively in devotion to Krishna, then it is a suicidal, Prabhupada says, suicidal policy. So Prabhupada in this purpose is stressing on this point. And it's good to understand this point. So our mind is actually mentally prepared. Yes, right now I have these commitments, these obligations, but gradually I have to come towards this. So mentally, at least in our mind, we should start preparing. Okay, next one.
Vishruja tatra tat sarvam dukula valayadikam nirmamo nirahankara sanchina shesha bandanaha. Venkat Prabhu, Varsha Mataji's next.
Hare Krishna. Maharaja Yudhishthira at once relinquished all his garments, belt, and ornaments of the royal order and became completely disinterested and unattached to everything.
The word important is Nirmamo Nirahankara. Even in Bhagavad Gita, this words Nirmamo Nirahankara you read few times, right? Actually, in 12th chapter, there's like Adveshta Sarva Bhutana Maitre Karuna Evacha Nirmamo Nirahankara. Right? That is the same thing he said. And basically, there Krishna is saying one who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not. So the main words Nirmamo Nirahankara means who does not think himself a proprietor and who is free from false ego. The nirmamo nirahankara means free from, does not think himself the proprietor, and one is free from false ego. So ni ahankara, ahankara means false ego. So one becomes free from false ego, and then one considers nirmamo, there's no material proprietorship anymore, right? My position, I am the emperor of the world. I have so many positions, this land, kingdom, this assembly, nothing, right? Nothing. I'm not claiming proprietorship of anything, right? And then false designation, no false designation. False ego, ahankar. Ahankar is created by so many layers of upadhis. Upadhi means designation. So false ego is actually layers of material upadhi. And what are the upadhis? So many. Like I am the boss of my company. I am Indian, I'm American, I'm this, I'm that, this is my house. All those things are actually layers that form our false ego. So, nir ahankara means to give up all these upadhis, right? To give up all these upadhis. And what is the definition of bhakti? Sarvopadi vinirmuktam, right? Giving up all these designations. That paratena nirvana. Actually come in that purified state. Rishikesha Sevan, to actually serve Rishikesh with our senses. Right? Bhakti, that is actually pure devotion service. So giving up all these designations. Oh, I am such a learned scholar. I am so and so. I am a Sanskrit Pandit. I am this. I am that. Giving up all these designations and just going in the humble mood of servant, be servant, be servant, be servant. Prabhupada in a lecture, he says, taken 100 times, taken 1,000 times, in that mood, rendering service. In that mood, rendering service. So that's how we prepare ourselves for this fight. And then also the word says, Ashesha Bandhana. Ashesha Bandhana means unlimited, Bandhana means what? Bondage. So we have so many unlimited bondages. Particularly if you do that meditation of saying like, this is the last mantra I'm chanting, then you realize how many bondages we have. And even that revelation of how many bondages, also only by mercy we realize all our layers of ahankar. So Sanchinna Ashesha Bandhana. Sanchinna means he cut off all those unlimited attachments. And then in that state of nirmama, nirahankara, giving up all false proprietorship, giving up all false designations, false ego, then he actually, he became completely disinterested and unattached to everything. So this again, this point about giving up that upadhis of false ego, like I heard one devotee making this point, that japa, during chanting japa, is the best time to practice giving up this upadhis. And His Holiness Sachin Swami Maharaj does this as a japa meditation. That he says, okay, now we give up. I am not Indian, I am not this, I am not this, I am not this. Who am I? I am just a spirit soul who is part and parcel of Krishna. That's it. And then in that consciousness, you start chanting japa. It's very powerful. Like he does this in the japa workshop. And when he's speaking and that entire, when it's like an association, it's a very powerful practice that we chant from that. But during japa, we are actually practicing giving up all these upadhis and chanting from the level of the spirit soul. Okay. And Prabhupada says to become purified of material contamination is the necessary qualification to become an associate of Krishna. Right? So we have to purify ourselves of all the material contamination. Okay, next verse.
Text 41. Vacham juhava manasi tat prana itare chatam mrityav apanam sutsargam tam panchatve yajohavit.
Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body into death. Then, as pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so this is the part where we read about how Maharaj Yudhishthir is actually finally, giving up all those attachments. So it is 8:37. I want to see, should we just take a break and then we'll come and we'll quickly do the last part because it's not so many points in the last section. Okay. And then maybe I'll start off chapter 16 today. We'll see how much we do. Chapter 16 actually that way is, I would say it is easier chapter than in every chapter of Bhagavatam. You could go so much into detail, but that chapter, I when I was reading, I was thinking like, okay, we could go a little faster in this chapter. Okay. So let's take a break, but before we go, let's do a quick overview. Maybe you can share any points from today's reading, anything that stood out to you, any points that you felt like, okay, this is good. So, when you're making these points, like it's good that it's kind of giving all of us a revision of what we have discussed. So please, everyone can either unmute, start speaking. Who would like to go first?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Yeah, in the very first, we start today this slok number 31. It says that is very important. Like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, that is the main thing for that. The simply chanting is the main thing. So it's clear our heart and we just focus on that one. That is the main thing. I like that one.
Thank you. Yeah, very nice.
Hare Krishna.
By chanting,
Yes.
constant chanting, all the coverings over our consciousness.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I really like the point that Krishna is still there in form of his instructions. And similarly, in the same, during the Govardhan retreat, His Holiness Satyendra Swami Maharaj was saying that Prabhupada is still here. All acharyas are still here in the form of their books, and Rupa Goswami used to come to Prabhupada and said that, oh, you have written enough, now go preach. So.
Very nice point. So in Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, where Prabhupada is sitting, like in Prabhupada's rooms, there's actually a letter that Prabhupada has written. Just such a powerful letter. If we find that. Maybe someone can go ahead and let's see if I can find that. Okay, anyone else? Oh, I found it. Okay, can I just say this before?
Sure.
Yeah. So this is Prabhupada's letter, and he says, those who stay here, he's talking about at Radha Damodar temple, will realize that those acharyas, Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Bhugarbha Goswami, are still living there. And if one is actually advancing in spiritual field, they can still take instructions from these acharyas. So today is the disappearance of Bhakti Saraswati Thakur. We can actually pray to Bhakti Saraswati Thakur to actually give us that. He is said to be a lion guru. Give us the strength to go out and preach, in a fierce way. And then Prabhupada continues. It is up to the individual how he realizes this by devotional service. Up to us how we realize it. By staying there, you must realize how pure the environment is. The environment itself gives a high taste of consciousness. Radha Damodar is there. The great Acharya Samadhis are there. There cannot be any other better place to live than Radha Damodar. This corner of Radha Damodar temple is just like the hub of the wheel of the spiritual world. It is the center. I eternally reside in my rooms at Radha Damodar temple. Okay. Sri Radha Mataji.
Prabhuji, can you share that letter, please?
Yes.
Sri
Radha Mataji.
Isn't it true? It is already written in the eternally reside in Sri Radha Damodar.
What? Oh, Mataji, your voice.
Prabhupada's room.
Yeah, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
So in the room of Radha Damodar, it is written on a stone.
Oh, yeah.
I eternally reside
I
here.
reside there. Yeah, go ahead, Sri Radha Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So one point, I think in the text 33, we talked about the passport to go back to Godhead. And I'm a big fan of Kunti Maharani. And she has a passport with the Ekanta Bhakti you talked about, which is very deviated. And you also suggested how we can bring that mode in when we are chanting. So that's a takeaway point for Prabhuji.
Thank you. Very nice point. If you can chant like, Madhav Prabhu's Kirtan is like so powerful. Why? Because like every mantra is like, this is my last mantra. If you can chant in that way, it's like, just transform our chanting. Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Oh, I also had the same. Yeah, that's not go.
Go ahead, Mataji.
I also was like the same as Mataji, like Ekantya Bhakti, and as you said that our chanting is gives us like how many false ego layers are there. So that is definitely a takeaway from today's class. Ekanta Bhakti. Absolutely.
Thank you.
When Arjuna is meditating on Krishna's instructions, and then Prabhupada says that one should adjust one's life activities in the pace of the mission of the Lord, and then how you mentioned that it's relishing the holy name ourselves and then distributing it to others. So both have to be there.
Thank you. Very. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Go ahead, Pratna.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. I like the point, like you mentioned the explanation about the Prabhu, like who's the controller, not like a Swami, but he's able to control himself. It's very nice explanation. And like we can see in the Yudhishthira Maharaj case, like in general, we are not able to control anything in our life, on our body or anything. But here Yudhishthira Maharaj was able to control his death also, that he decided that he wants to quit his body and go back to Godhead. That is a very big thing about that. And the point you mentioned about the story of Gaur Govind Maharaj disciple, that was very nice, because when Krishna left this material world and to do the pastimes in different world. So that time it was difficult, like when all the Pandavas, they're lamenting, and it's so sad to hear that how, but it is mentioned that because we don't love Krishna that much, so we can't feel that separation that is there. But then again, in this verses you mentioned like how we should take it through this pastime of Mataji, that we shouldn't lament, but we should do the service and help in Krishna conscious mission. It was very nice actually, instead of lamenting and just feeling sad. Thank you, Bruce.
And we learned this from Srila Prabhupada himself, right? His lifetime was service and separation. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Oh yeah, Lava
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I really like the points you pressed on chanting. So I think we should remember that while chanting, and all the layers will go away, while chanting, and the subtle body will be prepared to take us to the next body. So I think you connected all of them. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
The point that I would like to remember is two aspects of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Relish this nectar of a holy name and give it to others. First step is, we got to relish, that's the whole point of Bhagavatam.
Yeah. So both are like parallel tracks. Because when we give it, we actually are empowered to relish the nectar. It's not this one and then this one. Both go together, because when we are outside preaching, we are giving Krishna, distributing books, we are empowered by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by which we can relish. Thank you. Gopinath Sharma?
Yeah, I think we were discussing about this Mosa Lila, how Lord, passed, and basically it was like bewildering the Mayavadis. We didn't discuss in the 11th canto. It further goes to describe how that Jara was none other than Rigu Muni in the 6th chapter in the 11th canto. So that that was the arrangement of the Lord to bring him back. That's the next question.
Thank you. Yeah, 11th canto is like described. Like actually, this 11th canto starts off with this Mosa Lila and ends the last chapter. It actually concludes with the details. Okay, so let's take a quick break. continue. Shri Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai. So come back in 5 minutes. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
little louder, everybody. Little louder, I can't hear you. One more time, a little louder, everyone together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna, everyone. Dear devotees, please let's continue. So this practical point is so we had a last exam up to chapter 11. Keep track.
12th, Prabhuji.
12, yeah. So now 13, 14, 15 is the next module. So we'll complete 15 today. So we can have the exam. Let's see the calendar. I know few devotees are traveling. So the weekend after 18th, the Wednesday after that, right? And the Saturday after that. So not next weekend, the weekend after. So Wednesday and Saturday we'll do the same thing. And so that'll be the exam based on 13, 14, 15, right? 3 chapters. And also the essays, like, sorry, I have not kept track of where you're. I hope everyone has done the essays of the previous section, right? Everyone, yeah, okay. So this section you can start working on the essays, right? And maybe by the end of the year, end of the year, by 31st December, please submit your essays for this section, and then we'll have the last section of first canto. Okay, any questions about the practical points?
The next section we will do 4 chapters.
Yeah, last one will be 4 chapters probably. Yeah. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I just came now. I missed something. You said about the last 4 chapters will be there for the exam?
No. The exam will be not next weekend, the weekend after that, Saturday. And what are the dates?
Yeah.
24.
Yeah. So we'll have it on 21st is Wednesday. So we'll do it Wednesday and 24th. Would that work for everyone? Or people are traveling? I mean, if anyone is traveling for Christmas or something, you can let me know. But as of now, we can just plan these 2 days. And the exam, the essay for this section is due for 31st December, end of the year. Okay. So let's continue. So text 41. So we read the verse. So from 41 all the way to 45 is basically talking of how Maharaj Yudhishthira is actually detaching himself from this material, one-way material plane. Again, like one way, yes, Maharaj Yudhishthira is an eternal associate of the Lord, right? So, yes, but he's actually showing us how to actually live, right? So we said Bhagavatam is teaching us how to live and how to live, right? So these next few verses is that how to live, right? So in 41, very interestingly, it says he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, right? So basically, our senses are as such engaged in material activity. But what is the center of all the senses? The mind. Right? So Prabhupada in the purport, he focuses on the mind. And he says, main thing, our mind needs to be spiritualized. When we think about Krishna, we absorb our mind in Krishna consciousness, and in chanting, we have been talking of chanting. While chanting, we are thinking about Krishna. We are reading Bhagavatam. In that way, we are purifying our subtle body, and by that, then the senses are purified. So it is both ways, right? You act in activities of Krishna consciousness by which our subtle body is purified, and by purification of a subtle body, then our activities are more purified. Right? So here it's described how Maharaj Yudhishthira, he actually amalgamated all sense organs into the mind. So basically, Prabhupada explains that he became free from all material sense activities, and then he actually brought them to the level of the mind. Then Prabhupada says, what about the mind? He says the mind is, the activities of the mind cannot be stopped because they are the reflection of the soul. The soul as such is always active. The reflection of the soul is the mind. So mind, you cannot stop the activities. So the only way what you need to do is spiritualize the activities or the thoughts of the mind. Right? Spiritualize the thought. But the quality of these activities can be changed from matter to transcendental service of the Lord. And then further it is described. So after the mind, he merged the mind into the life into breathing, breathing into total existence, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, his body into death. Then as pure self, he became free from material conception of life. So one may try to understand that what is this, one way of understanding this verse and the next verse is basically the reason that we enter into this material world is because of our false conception of I being the center, I being the Lord, I being the enjoyer. Right? So when we read in the 2nd canto and in the 3rd canto, when the process of creation of this material world is described, it starts off with this aspect of, first is Pradhan, Mahatattva, but then there is the false ego, Ahankar. Right? And it is because of the Ahankar, that the 3 modes of material nature, all the Mahatattva is manifested into different material elements because of this false ego. Right? So false ego, the Mahatattva is manifested. And then that false ego tempts us to try to lord over all the different manifestations of that Mahatattva. Right? So Prabhupada explains. So just to read that one sentence, Prabhupada says, it is due to a living entity's forgetfulness of his true nature and his false conception of being the Lord that he is obliged to enter into the existence of false sense enjoyment. Thus, a concomitant generation of material energies is the principal cause of the mind's being materially affected. So concomitant generation of material energy. So basically, it's the Mahat Tattva, which is the sum total of all material energies, and they manifest into so many different material energies. Why? Because of our desire to lord it over these energies. So that is basically how the aspect of creation is explained. Now, how do you get free from this? It is basically going back. Right? So Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, it's kind of reverse engineering. So this term reverse engineering is used when a product is already made and one actually tries to dismantle the product, the different elements, to see how did they actually start off. So similarly, we reverse engineer in the sense that we go from the back, okay, senses are there, mind is there, start going towards Brahman, towards spiritual, right? So this and the next verse is actually talking about that process. Prabhupada in the purport, he actually just focuses on the mind, and he says how the mind needs to be purified. That's the main thing. The mind is purified by practice of devotional service, constantly engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. Then there is no more chance of the mind actually producing another material body, and that we can attain perfection. Okay, let's go 42.
Ritve hudva cha panchatvam tatchaikatve juhonmuni sarvam atman yajuhavid brahmanyatmanam avyaye. I think Arundhati Mataji.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thus, annihilating the gross body of 5 elements into the 3 qualitative modes of material nature, he merged them in one essence and then absorbed that essence in the self, Brahman, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances.
So, this is actually continuing to the previous verse where he's actually taking the elements one into the other, and then finally he says, thus annihilating the gross body of 5 elements, right? This actually you can understand when we actually in second canto read the process of creation, because then you can trace, oh, that's how creation is happening, and that's how it's actually going back, right? So, so the 5 elements into the 3 modes of material nature, which is actually merged into nescience, and then that nescience is the false ego, and that false ego is merged into Brahman, right? So that comes to the spiritual platform. Okay. And Prabhupada in the purport makes this point that when one actually has this desire to go back to Godhead, to become an associate of the Lord, then one has to think always that he is different from the material energy. He has nothing to do with this material energy, and he has to realize himself as pure spirit soul. Jivera Sarupai Krishna Das. Jeev Krishna Das, A Vishwas, Kole Tuar Dukona. Jeev Krishna Das. We Jeev, living entity, is what? Krishna Das. A Vishwas, when we have that firm conviction, Kole Tuar Dukana. There is no more dukkha in this material. Okay. And then Prabhupada, when he talks of Brahman, he says one must come to the level of Brahman, but Prabhupada says one must act on the platform of Brahman, right? One must not only think himself that now I become Brahman, right? We should act on the platform of Brahman. That basically means that, Prabhupada is saying the impersonal philosophy of merging into Brahman. He's saying, that is not correct. We are still active. So the point about like becoming Brahman means you have to act on that spiritual platform. Next, 43.
Chiravasa niraharo badhavan mukta murdajaha darshanatmano rupam janomata pishachavat anavekshamano nirgad ashrinvan bhatiro yata.
Translation: After that, Maharaj Yudhishthir dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing.
So here it is showing how Maharaj uses complete disregard for external material affairs. At that stage where he is not even like caring for eating, like just like voluntarily dumb, he's not even engaging his senses in that way. His hair is left. So imagine he's the emperor of the world, but now he's dressed himself in torn clothing. That means he's completely rejecting all material things, right? And then he is actually he did not depend. Okay, and then he almost was like a madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything. So this point is actually one point that we can explain, that up to this point, like through a story of Mahabharata, we see that in every episode of Mahabharata, every pastor, the Maharaj Yudhishthira and the 5 Pandavas, they worked as one unit. Right? Yes, there were some disagreements here and there, but always it was working as one unit. And Maharaj Yudhishthira was dependent on his brothers, They did things together, they fought battles together. But now, what is it? No longer dependent upon each other. And I was thinking this is like a practical point, that when we come to the point of final pastime, at that pastime, all our relationships, commitments, one way, like, okay, we are devotees, then they can help us during the final time. But otherwise, we have to just say, like, oh, okay, no more. Now is my most crucial time. Just like, if you can help me fix my mind on Krishna, then okay. Otherwise, that's it. No more connection. Right? So Maharaj Yudhishthira, who, Pandavas, he's actually saying he did not depend on his brothers for anything. And just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. Okay, and Prabhupada says, this stage of complete independence from everything, right? Not dependent on anything material. No food, how he looks, everything is just like, ignore everything. It's actually called the purified stage of fearlessness. Purified stage of fearlessness. 44.
Udicim pravivishasham gata purva mahatmabhihi riddhi brahma param dhyayan na varteta ito gataha.
Gagandeep Prabhu wants to read nothing.
Gagandeep Prabhu, would you like to read?
Go ahead, Gopinath.
He then started towards the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he lived in that way wherever he went.
Right? So basically, he left to the north. So after describing of how he amalgamated senses into mind, life, breathing, 5 elements into the 3 modes, into false ego, and then the self into Brahman. After that is described how he gave up everything external. He did not depend on his brothers, anything. And then now it is that he walked towards the north. And he took the path that his forefathers and great men actually took, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Lord. So again, that point is actually coming of like the Sanskrit says, dhyayan, constantly thinking about. So undeviated, uninterrupted absorption in Krishna. Undeviated, uninterrupted absorption in Krishna. So wherever he went, he was completely absorbed in the thought of Krishna. And again, Prabhupada in the purport talks about acceptance of the time, where he emphasizes the importance of leaving all household connections at a certain stage. Right? No king or respectable gentleman would continue family life till the end, because that was considered suicidal. So again, Prabhupada is using the word suicidal policy. Again, he says that is considered suicidal and against the interest of the perfection of human life. One must devote himself 100%, 100% in devotional service to Krishna. He constantly thought about Krishna within himself. Okay. Next, and also like Chakravarti Pad is saying, he did not even wait for his brothers. He was actually decided to carry out. Krishna said, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. He was completely absorbed with that. My mind needs to be completely absorbed in Krishna. I have to become a devotee of Krishna, like a devotee of Krishna. So in that way, he actually went to the Lord. 45.
Sarvetam anunir jagmur bratara krita nishchayaha halina dharma mitrena drishta sprishta prajapuvi.
Translation, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthira observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother.
Anu nir jagmu. Anu means to follow. Who? All the brothers, they decided to follow Maharaj Yudhishthira. Right? So previously we read how Chakravarti Pad is saying Yudhishthira Maharaj didn't even think about his brothers. Just walked straight to north. Right? Now the brothers, seeing influence of Kali has come, they decided, okay, now also we should follow our brothers on the same path. Right? And they also observed that how the citizens also had become adharma. They were observing this adharmic principle. They followed the Prabhupada in purport, he actually makes, first of all, he says, one must retire from family life after half the duration of life is finished. You see, like Prabhupada is like really stressing on this again and again, that how we should think about this, prepare ourselves. And he says half the duration, so basically 50 years, one has to start thinking about retirement. Retirement means giving up our active engagement and just focusing completely on devotional activities. And then Prabhupada actually, Prabhupada makes a point that, people, even if they retire, they do not know how to engage themselves. Recently, like at my workplace, like one person, like 70 years old, he retired. And then, like, naturally, it's like you talk about like, oh, what's your plans after retirement? He said, I like the company so much, I'm thinking of doing voluntary work for the company. Like, that is their thing, that, even at 70 years, like, just want to work, the work is so good. Like, imagine, like, people don't even know, okay, after retire, what should I do? They are unaware of this final exam and that important, the suicidal policy that Prabhupada is talking about. They're unaware of it. And it's really, one way we feel sad. But the only way to distribute Prabhupada's books, you have to give this knowledge to people. Like one more instance, I think I mentioned this earlier, that we were at one program and it was a different Bhakti Vish, like someone else was conducting, and then it was end of the year, so he actually had this question that, oh, if you have 6 months to live, what would you do, right? And there was this, like, it seemed like a pious, like Indian elderly person, he was quite old, and he was saying, okay, if I have 6 months, then I'll see if I can climb the Mount Everest. And it's just like, I was like, you're so old and then you're thinking of Mount Everest, and it's just like, unlimited desires, and then at the time of retirement, people don't know what to do. And so here, Prabhupada actually challenges, like, after people don't know how to engage ourselves, but in devotional service, we know how to engage. And so there's so many engagement. Just like how Prabhupada designed our morning program, starting at 4:30 in the morning. By the time you finish Bhagavatam class and breakfast is already 10 o'clock. And then, you can have more Bhagavatam reading, doing active seva, unlimited opportunities to engage ourselves. And that is actually a gift of Prabhupada. Otherwise, if the mind is empty, you don't know what to do, then naturally you will go towards material things. But if the Guru actually gives us all these different engagements, so we can focus on mind, say, okay, I'll absorb in these activities, by which I can focus on Krishna. Okay, next, 46.
Ke sadhu krita sarvarta gyatvat yantikam atmanaha manasa dharayamasur vaikunta charanambujam.
Okay, who's next?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
They all had performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna are the supreme goal of all. Therefore, they meditated upon his feet without interruption. Hare Krishna.
Again, we see the point, without interruption. And then Vaikunta Charanambhujam. They meditated upon the lotus feet of Lord. And then one point is very important. The Sutta Goswami is actually saying, Te sadhukrit sarvata. They actually sadhukrit. They had actually performed all their life. They had led their entire life following these principles, and hence they could actually meditate 100% on the Lord. So, so Prabhupada actually in the purport quotes that Yesham tva antakatam papam jananam punya karmanam. That verse in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita makes the point that unless one has actually, in that verse, unless one has got free from all sinful activities and lived the life in a pious way, he cannot engage in determination in devotional service. Right? So that verse, bhajante mam dhrida vrita. That dhrida vrita, that determination in devotional service will not come if one has not lived a pure life. Right? So basically, Prabhupada quotes that to make the point that it's not that, okay, I will do everything now, and at the time of death, I'll focus 100%. When people hear Ajamil pastime, sometimes this question comes. Can't I just do everything right now? At the time of death, I'll chant the name of Krishna and then that's it. And people think that, oh, I can enjoy life, I can do whatever. But here it's really saying, Sutta Goswami is stressing on that point. Because they had lived their life following the sadhukrit, living in that way, at the end, they could actually Vaikuntha Chandrabhuja. So all the brothers, they meditate upon the feet without any interruption. They knew that lotus feet of Lord Krishna are the supreme goal of all. Okay. Next, 47, 48.
Tadjnanodriktaya bhaktya vishuddhadishana pare tasmin narayana pade ekanta matayo gatim avapur duravapam te asadbhir vishayatmabhihi vidhuta kalmasha sthanam virajenatmanaivahi.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attain the spiritual sky, which is ruled over the spiritual by the Supreme Narayana, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of Lord Sri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavana, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life, but the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same bodies.
So it says dhyana, right? Positive meditation, bhaktya. So because of devotional service, that's why pure consciousness, by constant devotional service, they attain what? Narayana, like the verse actually says, Tasmin Narayana Pade. They attain the lotus feet of Narayana. So Prabhupada in the purport explains this as they actually attain Goloka Vrindavan. They attain the they attain Goloka Vrindavan. And then further that verse says, and then Duravapam is actually very difficult to attain. Particularly those who are asadbihi means those who are materialists, because they are always Vishaya Atmabihi, those materialists who are absorbed in material needs, for them it is impossible to attain. But the Pandavas, they are Viduta Kalmasu. Viduta, this word you know, right? Dhunoti, right? So Vidhuta, right? So Vidhuta, they were washed away of all kalmasaha, all the material contaminations, and hence they attain this, the Goloka Vrindavana, the highest perfection. And then the last part says, Atmana evahi, in the very same body. Right? Because Pandavas are actually eternal associates of the Lord. Right? So they actually attain the highest perfection in the very same body. So Prabhupada in the purport quotes Jiva Goswami, and he actually says, actually this attaining the spiritual abode in the very same body is actually possible for one who has actually, lived his life in that complete devotional service. Because going back to the point, as we are living our life in devotional service, we are spiritualizing our existence, right? That's why our acharyas, their body is not burned, but they are put into samadhi. Prabhupada Samadhi and Samadhi of Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. Why? Because their entire body is completely spiritualized. So Prabhupada quotes Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, how he says that when we engage in devotional service, then our body itself is transformed from material into spiritual. Right? And he makes a point that one can actually attain the highest perfection in the very same body. So here, particularly the Pandavas in the eternal associates of the Lord, it is described that Prabhupada says, right, they attain the Goloka Vrindavan without change of body, as we have already discussed in connection with the Lord's returning to his abode without a change. So it's how Krishna, Swatanva, we read that word, Swatanva, he actually left in his very same body. Similarly, the associates of the Lord, they actually left in the very same body. Okay, next verse. 49.
Viduropi parityajya paribhashete ham atmanaha Krishna veshena tachchitaha pitribhi svakshayam yayo.
Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhas. Because he was absorbed in thoughts of Lord Krishna, he was received by the denizens of Pitruloka planet, where he returned to his original post.
So interesting that Vidura, it says Krishna Aveshena. So even he was absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. But then it says he did not attain Goloka Vrindavan. He was received by the denizens of Pitraloka. Right? So Prabhupada in the purport points out this difference between Vidura and the Pandavas, that Vidura is one of the administrative demigods. Right? He is actually Yamaraj himself. So he actually, by meditation on Krishna, got rid of the impurities of getting a birth in a Shudra family or getting a birth as a Shudra. Right? He got rid of all those and then he re-attained his position as Yamaraj. Now, Yamaraj himself is one of the Mahajans, which is actually a pure devotee of the Lord. Right? So Prabhupada points out the difference between why Vidura attained Pitraloka, whereas the devotees of the Lord, they actually attain Vaikuntha, or the spiritual abode. And then Prabhupada points another thing, and he says that how these Yamaraj is a devotee of the Lord, and the devotees of the Lord have nothing to fear from him. To the devotees, he is a cordial friend. But to the non-devotees, he is fear personified. Right? So at the time of death, right, to the non-devotees, when Yamaraj or Yamadutas come, then it is fear personified. Like Guru Maharaj said, by the time of death, if you see Yamaraj, then what we'll say, Vanchakalpatarubhasya, if you pass in the way, so we offer our obeisances, we are devotee of the Lord. So in that way, we offer obeisances. Right? So for devotees, and we'll read this in the next chapter also, how there's a trick how we can escape the influence of Yamaraj. It is in the next chapter. It is there. But Yamaraj himself, Prabhupada is making it point, he's a devotee. So those who are devotees of the Lord, then Yamaraj actually is one cordial friend. Right? Okay, the last verse. Oh, sorry, last two more.
Text 50. Draupadi cha tadagyaya patinam anapekshatam vasudeve bhagavati yekantamati apatam. Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands.
So again, if you see the Sanskrit, Vasudeva Bhagavati Ekanta Matir. Again, that point, again and again, we see that undeviated, uninterrupted, one-pointed absorption in Krishna. Right? So here is saying, even Draupadi, and Prabhupada explains that Chakravarti Pad is actually saying that actually even Subhadra was there, though her name is not mentioned, but even Subhadra actually attained the same destination. Right? So also an interesting point is without caring for her, right? So normally the wife is under the protection of the husband, but now at the final moment, the husbands even did not care for Draupadi. They walk alone. And then Draupadi saying, my husband didn't even care for me. So she also said, okay, now is the time. Complete absorption in Krishna. And she also attained the perfection. Right? Now Prabhupada in the purport makes a very important point. The starting, he says, when flying an airplane, one cannot take care of other planes. Very important point. It says like, when you're on an airplane and there's another airplane next to you, you cannot do anything much. Right? It's just like you can do something to your airplane, you cannot do something to the other airplane. So similarly, he says, when we are here, in the final phases of our life, yes, our devotee friends, our relatives may actually help us. Saying that, oh, please focus on Krishna, let everything go. Now you don't need to think of anything except Krishna. But once we leave, it is our own journey. Right? It is our own journey. So we have to prepare ourselves for our own journey. It's not that others can actually do something with our consciousness. They can assist, but we have to focus our consciousness on Krishna. That absorption has to be from our own self. The Prabhupada in the first section of the purport just makes this point. Similarly, at the end of life, when one has to go back home, back to Godhead, everyone has to take care of himself without help rendered by another. Yes, at the ground, there is help. The help is, however, offered on the ground before flying in space. But once the journey starts, we have to have that complete absorption in Krishna. And unless we practice throughout our life, It is not going to happen at the end of our life. And Prabhupada says, since Draupadi was already trained, in Krishna consciousness, she could absorb herself in Krishna, and hence she attained the highest perfection. And she was also an eternal associate of the Lord, so she attained perfection. Okay? And last verse is actually the Falshruti of this pastime. Right? So in Bhagavatam, again and again, we read that when there's a particular section, then it actually concludes with a Falshruti. Falshruti means the benefit of reading this section. So that's the last verse.
Yashradayaitat bhagavat priyanam pando sutanam iti samprayanam Srinotyalam swastyayanam pavitram labdva haro bhakti mupaiti siddhim. Shri Radhe Mataji.
The subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and is perfect pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life.
The Bhagavatam is so powerful. One pastime, just this one pastime, it says if we actually Shraddhaya Aitat. So if you have heard this with that Shraddhaya, with that devotion, that for anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith, then you actually get a Bhaktin Upaiti Siddhim. One gains that perfection of devotional service. Just as one pastime, right? And what pastime? Then it actually said Bhagavad Priyana Pandavu. So those Pandavas who are actually very dear to Lord Sri Krishna, their final departure, this Samprayana, right? Departure for the ultimate goal. One who actually Shrunoti hears this. So this subject matter of departure of sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is Swastya Yayanam. Good fortune and pavitram, completely pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this with devotion, he actually hears this narration with devotional faith, Shraddhaya, then he actually gets devotional service to the Lord, the highest perfection of life. Last sentence of the purport, Prabhupada says, by the process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one can attain the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to God. So just by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, we can get the highest perfection of going back home.
And Prabhupada says, without failure.
Without failure, yes, without failure. Okay, Yatra Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, 9:31. Any questions or comments up to this point?
One quick question, Prabhu. So all the Pandavas left with their own body and going up north, right? So, but the ladies, Draupadi and Subhadra, they remained in the palace or wherever they were living and then just meditated, right? That's
And they also
got the same result, right? Okay.
Like Chakravarti Pada actually makes a point that even Draupadi is actually an eternal associate of the Lord. So even she actually attained that original position. So it's interesting that when you read Mahabharata, there's a whole different perspective of how Pandavas went through the heavenly planets and all. And we can see the focus of the Mahabharata versus focus of Bhagavatam. Focus of Bhagavatam is completely devotional perspective. Like, what is the emphasis of Yudhishthira Maharaj? How he actually gave up all the externals, the one-pointed focus on Krishna, attained Golopadana. That's the focus of it. So again and again in different pastimes we see this. Okay, Ratna.
Yes, I had two quick questions. One was when it says they you can attain the spiritual world in the self-same body. When Prabhupada was mentioning that, do I understand it that our body becomes spiritualized and our more and more siddha, like we get more and more in touch with our spiritual body, and then so it's the transition will become very smooth. It's more like you just step into your spiritual body because you already developed that, but it's not like you'll actually take this body to the spiritual world, right? Is that how you understand it, or how do we?
Because the main thing is actually explain, like what really defines us is our subtle body. The material body is just like elements. It's like the earth, water, fire, air, ether, and they are just dependent. What material external we have is dependent on what is a subtle consciousness of subtle body. And at the time of that, we get new body based on a subtle body. So in this, we understand that subtle body is completely spiritualized, right? And that we can understand that the mind becomes more and more spiritual. We are just completely focused on Krishna. And then because subtle body is completely pure at that time, because you know how it says in the spiritual world, we have a spiritual mind. We think about how we can serve Radha Krishna, how Vrinda Devi is giving us this instruction. So all those things are there. Right? So even here, before we actually take that transition, our mind is completely spiritualized. So we may still be like, you know, how we have stories of devotees who, like there was one particular story of, and so I'll finish my point and give you this example. But because the mind, a subtle body defines who we are, it's completely spiritualized. So we actually, our subtle body is taking us back to the spiritual world. In general, the subtle body is made of material mind, material senses. Krishna says, Bhumi Rapo Nalo Vaya. They're all material. But they become spiritualized to that extent that the same subtle body actually takes us back home. And that's the very same body. But again, in Pandava's case, we can understand that they had eternal body. So the external and the internal is actually the same. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, and another example, I think you read the story about that. One Mataji, when she left, like even before she left, she was actually, you know, she could actually remember her. She actually had that consciousness of who is her position in the spiritual world. And before leaving also, she was saying that, oh, I'm actually assisting Mother Yashoda in cooking her lunch for Krishna. And she was in that state, you know. So even though she was here, her consciousness, her subtle body was already there because she was already engaged in the spiritual activities of her real swarup. Right? The famous story is that of an ISKCON devotee. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
And the other quick question was, you know, when it says that Yudhishthir didn't care for his brothers or his wife, they just left. Like it seems so cold-hearted because aren't Vaishnavas supposed to be so kind and caring? Like if someone is, I don't know, it seems like as Vaishnavas we want to help each other and like, you know, especially at this crucial time.
Mm-hmm. Like one thing with the Pandavas for sure is that, you know, he knew that how all the other brothers are already, you know, in that consciousness, right? Normally for us, you know, we still have some attachments here, some attachments there. So it is good for us to be there when, you know, any devotee is leaving because you can actually help them. You know, how Prabhupada says, on the ground, you can guide them. Right? And we read stories of this beautiful story of one of Indrabhumna Maharaj's disciple. There's a book on that, Braj Leela. Amazing book. Like where she was in Vrindavan and she was like, you know, she was going to leave, but she said, no. When the Guru Maharaj comes, I'll leave, right? So then Indrabhumna Maharaj came, and then how he was actually helping her. You know, just focus on Krishna, just leave everything. Like, you know, the Guru was actually giving her guidance how to live. So because, you know, we are sadhakas and, you know, even at that moment, maybe there are some attachments here and there, we help. But in the case of Pandavas, he knew that all of them are actually anyway perfect. They don't need any help for that ekanta matir absorption. Right? One point, they're all qualified to have the one point. So, Venkat Prabhu, you have a question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dhanavad Prana. Prabhuji, like one point, mind is always active. It's a reflection of the soul. So the contamination is coming from the mind, or but the soul is the pure, right, Prabhuji?
Yeah. The soul itself is pure, but the ego, the identification of, you know, the false ego that actually tells us that we are not spirit soul, we are not servant of Krishna, but we are a part of this material world. It is that false ego or the consciousness that is actually polluted. Right? The soul itself is pure, but the energy of the soul consciousness is polluted, and that consciousness is polluted. Why? Because of ahankara. Because of the false ego of saying that, oh, aham sarvam iti, right? Not Vasudeva sarvam iti, aham sarvam iti. And that is the false ego. And because of that, our consciousness is polluted. And then there are so many layers of this aham, this upadhis, right, that actually are reflected on the mind. And hence the mind is actually always so contaminated. The mind is actually dragging us to material objects. And in our sadhaka, as we are practicing our spiritual life, it is a fight with the mind again and again. Because the mind is the reflection of the soul, the consciousness, which is polluted with all these different layers. So just a side point here, how people focus at, oh, mind is not in control. Let's just do some self-help. All these self-help are so popular to just control the mind. But the mind is a reflection of our consciousness. Unless our consciousness is purified, all those self-help things are patchwork. Patchwork. The only thing is our consciousness is to purify. And how is that? Cheto Darpana Mantra. By chanting Hare Krishna. Is that okay, Venkata?
Yes.
But why it is in case of Pandavas it is mentioned that their contamination was purified, and then when, because they were devotees, how come they also have the contamination?
That's like how I explained with Arjun's case. There we can see that contamination. But in the case of Pandavas, like the remaining, again we can consider a similar point like how Arjun himself, because as such, like how in Arjun's case I explained this point that Arjun is an eternal associate of the Lord, so there is no question of his contamination. But here that contamination is referring to that separation that he was feeling from Krishna, which he was thinking he separated from Krishna. So similarly, the Pandavas, when they heard from Arjun, oh, Krishna is left, so even they were feeling that mood of like, oh, Krishna is left, but actually Krishna is always there. So that contamination one can refer. And also the other point we can say is Yudhishthir Maharaj was playing the role of the emperor of the world. But now he had to get rid of that. I'm no longer the emperor. I don't have responsibilities to the citizens anymore. So even though he was playing that role in Krishna consciousness, that we actually read, that what was the word? Anyway, in the previous chapters, we read how Yudhishthira Maharaj, even though he was ruling, he was always absorbed in Krishna. See, this is a nice point you actually brought up, that while we are here in this life, we have so many duties, and we are trying to do those duties in Krishna consciousness, right? All our relationships, our job, we are trying to connect everything to Krishna. But finally, at the end, all those duties which are actually related to our Naimittika Dharma, not Nitya Dharma, Naimittika Dharma, we actually give up those duties also, right? So at that time, we are not even like, oh, I am not husband of so-and-so, I am not this, like, I am just spirit soul, right? So duty itself, we are actually saying, like Arjun as Kshatriya, like how in Bhagavad Gita, again and again Krishna forgets, no, your duty is as Kshatriya. Throughout Bhagavad Gita, we say, as a Kshatriya, you do your duty. That is more important than just false renunciation. Repeated duty. But at the end, what is it? No longer Kshatriya, no longer your duty, just spirit soul. Similarly, when we go, so throughout our life, we are spiritualizing our Naimittika Dharma, but towards the end, we are saying, I don't care for my Naimittika Dharma. So that content, that can be considered. Okay, Vijay Mataji.
Prabhuji, I understand that you were saying that Arjun is an eternal associate of the Lord. So his contamination was that he thought that Krishna has left, right? Separation from Krishna. But for us, this separation for Krishna is correct, right? We chant in the mood of Vipralamba. Huh?
Yes.
This is not our contamination, right?
Right. Yeah. So that point about separation, which we are seeing throughout Bhagavatam, like, that's another point that we meditate, that, all these sections that we are reading, that is that mood of separation we see again and again. And that's actually the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But that separation, like how we are chanting in the mood of separation, that we're chanting the holy name, and you're saying, Krishna, where are you? We are looking at Radha Golokananda and say, oh, Krishna, why are you so far? When will you reveal yourself to me? That separation is there, right? So even though the Lord is there, but we are actually connecting to the Lord in the mood of separation. Right? In Arjun's case, he was feeling that I cannot have that intimate relationship because the Lord is separate. For us, we are connecting with the Lord in that mood of separation, chanting in that mood of separation. You see the point? So our connection is the flavor of our connection is actually in that mood of separation. And that's actually a prerogative of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he has taught us to actually engage in devotional service in this mood of separation, because we are following the mood of the gopis of Vrindavan, following Rupa Goswami. So we have to actually develop that mood of separation for us. We right now are separated from Krishna, but we are practicing devotional service in a different separation from Krishna, where it is a mood of longing for Krishna. Okay. So anyway, 44. So we cannot start next chapter. But chapter 16 is maybe this week we can read through chapter 16. It's a almost like, I would say, like kind of straightforward chapter, and it's not a very big chapter. So next class we'll complete chapter 16. Any other final comments?
This chapter is like it's like good lessons for everybody and for us, how it's practical. Yudhishthir Maharaj and Pandavasdi. Very good.
It's especially that point about like thinking about retiring from active life.
Yes.
How the Pandavas are showing the example.
Yeah. So live as a like soul level, not like bodily level.
A suicidal policy. A lot to meditate upon. It's very practical. And we are right now in Grihastha Ashram. We have lots of commitments, attachment, but our thinking, at least our mind should think towards that. That okay, gradually, and how will I live? How will I engage myself? And for us, practically, like when we say that kind of engagement, we can stay close to an ISKCON temple and just commit ourselves, like Pujari Seva, doing Seva, helping the temple, cooking for deities. Like, that is more of a like kind of vanaprastha, and also taking time to go to the dhams as much as possible. That is kind of a vanaprastha where we are not so much.
Prabhuji, one request, maybe in our Bhakti Vriksha session, please help us and guide us to, you talked about, in meditation, we can get rid of those upadhis. Just help us and guide us in our japa classes.
I would suggest that Living Name book is actually really good in that.
Yeah,
so if you don't have, actually now, just recently, the book has come on Kindle. So if you read online,
which book, Prabhuji?
The Living Name by His Holiness Sachinandan Swami. Okay, so the online version just came out. So if you read online, you can download that. Okay, so it's 9:46. So formally we'll end the class. I still see 2 hands, but formally we'll end now. And if you want to stay on, then I'll just answer 2 more questions. So thank you so much. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Thank you all so much. This Bhagavatam is so wonderful. So take time, relish Bhagavatam. This is our life. To drink Bhagavatam, get intoxicated, get up, again drink Bhagavatam. That's our life. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Okay. Vijay Mati, you have a question. So devotees, if you can to leave for other purposes.
Prabhuji, actually, I have a question about chapter 16. Should I ask now or maybe in the next class?
Maybe next class. Or if you have, something is stopping your reading, you can text it to me. Because
Okay.
Arundhati?
Yeah, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. So when we are chanting in this Vipralam Bhava, in the mood of separation, a mood of longing for Krishna, then there is no material contamination. Is that correct, Prabhuji? Is that correct understanding? Like what Arjuna is missing was, he was thinking that Krishna is not there anymore.
Yeah.
So
So
that's the mistake. And but when we do this, like sincerely, as you said, ekantamatihi, with uninterrupted, unmotivated devotion. So is that a spiritualizing ourselves, and at that point we don't have any material contamination? Is that a correct understanding?
yeah, like that stage itself is quite a high stage. First to actually chant in that mood of separation. It's that itself is a very elevated stage, and gradually we need to practice that. And like Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually makes a point, it's like developing that Purva Rag for Krishna. Developing that. Because separation, there are different kinds. I'm not going to do that. But one of them is that Purva Rag, where it's anticipating our meeting with Krishna. Purva Rag is like, that's what like the gopis, they are thinking like, oh, now we are going to see Krishna. So when we are chanting, we are thinking that, when will I see Krishna? Like, yes, we see Krishna, Radha Golokananda, we see, Krishna, but when will we really see Krishna? So we can actually kind of develop that. There's actually one class I recently heard, it's a part of the Govardhan retreat, where Sachin Maharaj, he gave a class entirely on developing the desire to see Krishna face to face. So it's deeper, it's not like a neophyte stage, but it's deeper, where we are actually going deeper and saying, Krishna, when will I see you? And then chanting in that mood of like, Krishna, when will I see you? How many lifetimes, how many years, and so on. So that mood. And the best way to cultivate that mood is to actually read bhajans of our acharyas. Particularly like Sharnagati by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he expresses the mood of longing. And then later on, higher level is going to Rupa Goswami, and he has written so many verses in that mood. But Sharnagati is good, and then also Prarthana by Narottam Das Thakur. So by reading those bhajans, we can try to at least imbibe a drop of the mood of these bhajans.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bhagavatam. Thank you so much. Srila Bhakti Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.